Hello, friends. Welcome to this month's episode of Chris Chambers Noir. Our topic today is how noir shapes crime fiction and the future trends. Our guest is Alex Kenna, a mystery writer, prosecutor, and amateur painter. Her first novel, What Meets the Eye, was a 2023 Shamus Award finalist for Best First PI Novels. Kirkus Reviews called it a righteous, painful debut, and we can't wait to hear more about that. Bookpage called her a master in the making, as she lives in LA with her husband, her son, and a giant schnauzer. Before law school, she studied art and art history, worked as a freelance culture writer for The Atlantic and other publications, and sold paintings in a gallery. When she's not writing, Alex can be found exploring Washington State, toddler-wrangling, and playing string instruments badly. I totally can relate to that. Her new book is called Burn This Night, and we can't wait to hear all about what shapes crime fiction and future trends. I'm Hope Katz-Gibbs, proud producer of the show on Incandescent Radio, Incandescent TV, and you can also find us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple. And our videos are on Chris Chambers Noir TV on YouTube. I'm going to throw it over to Chris and Alex. Have a great time. We can't wait to hear all about this fantastic topic.
Thank you. And again, welcome to Chris Chambers Noir on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Incandescent Radio, and YouTube, where you can see my pretty face and everybody else. I'm the prettiest one, of course, because I am the host. It is a real treat to have this guest on. We're going to talk about the books. We're going to talk about What Meets the Eye and Burn This Night. And of course, the allegorical titles, because the first one relates to art and the second one relates to fire. But I have to share one thing. I found out today that Alex Kenna is a fellow Washingtonian. Hail to the Redskins.
Yeah, it's a wonderful talent. Love DC. It will always have my heart.
Yes, I should have brought on some mumbo sauce. I should have had some go-go music playing in the back. I should have, have some half smokes. I could ship them out. You can eat those. Some crab cakes. It is great to see another child of swift Potomac. Although it's not that swift. There's more than ice floating in it now. If you've been following the news.
Yeah, it sounds like a mess.
It is a mess. And of course, our president blamed the governor of Maryland, even though the governor of Maryland said, no, you feds are the ones that have the responsibility for it. So that's kind of ironic that the president was claiming somebody else was full of shit. So, but we'll leave it at that. But we're allowed to make those pronouncements here on my podcast. But it is so great to have you. And in addition to being a fellow Washingtonian, were you born in Washington?
No, I was born in LA, but we moved when I was little. So I grew up in DC. I lived there a little bit in my 20s, which it was a really fun time to be in your 20s in DC because everybody was doing interesting things. It was back in a time where, you could talk to people who disagreed with you and have a interesting conversation.
How about that, right?
Yeah. The DC that I remember is probably very different from what we have now. And I do just want to correct one thing. I'm actually in Tacoma, Washington now. We moved very recently, so that's on me. I need to update my bio.
Well, you are now in the official Northwest, and I think we joked about Kate Jackson, who is up there and writes about Sasquatch, and we're going to have to talk about Sasquatch at the end.
Oh my God, he's everywhere. Yeah, I was not prepared for the Sasquatch culture, but it is real and it is
amazing, isn't it? Of all the things up there that is so amazing up there in that area, this is the one thing. Here it's Marion Barry. There it's Sasquatch.
That's the motto.
Go figure.
And they got a lot of other, it's actually, I'd say Sasquatch and octopuses. There's like everywhere you go, everything's covered in octopuses. Apparently in Tacoma, they used to do octopus wrestling, which I just learned because we have giant octopuses. So that's a thing. So
What,
yeah,
you mean people and octopuses or two octopuses?
I think it's people and octopuses. This was one of those things where I heard it and like put a pin on it to go back and look into it because it gets a little weird in the Pacific Northwest. I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, no, I had heard of Sasquatch, but I did not expect to see his illustrated picture everywhere I go.
Yeah, yeah. Gosh, well, it's look. I'm going to be at Left Coast Crime this time tomorrow, and they don't call it the Left Coast for nothing. So
No.
from the Northwest down to San Diego, it is a whole different ball game. Now I just wanted to. This really wasn't the icebreaker. The icebreaker was, you were nominated for a Shamus for What Meets the Eye, and I've been nominated for those, and it's like being a bridesmaid. So my icebreaker is: have you ever been a bridesmaid? And is it really so wonderful, and you're being selfless and you're giving of yourself to support the bride, or is it really a big pain in the ass?
You know what?
And you're so mad seeing somebody else win. Really, give me your thoughts on that.
You know what? I actually haven't been a bridesmaid, probably because most of my close friends know that I think weddings are stupid. Like, my husband and I, we're completely unromantic. I got married when my insurance ran out, and he was working for a judge who married us at his lunch hour, and I wore an old dress.
Wow.
So, and it happened to be Valentine's Day, which we forgot because we don't really do Valentine's Day. So, we accidentally got married on Valentine's Day, and as in an insurance shotgun wedding, and there's a lot of politics, I think, in bridesmaidhood, and I'm a person who doesn't care. So I've had a couple friends be like, "Do you care if you're a bridesmaid?" I'm like,
right.
I don't want to go buy a dress. Do your thing, invite other people. So yeah, long story short, I have not been a bridesmaid. And I'm happy to go to somebody's wedding and drink and take in the scenery, but that's enough for me.
Okay, I want to go back to insurance shotgun wedding.
Yeah,
I had to write that down. I might call like Chad Williamson and those guys because they could probably use that, Wes Brown and them in one of their stories because that sounds like. But I mean, see, well, some advice you probably should, for the sake of your kid, say that you knew it was Valentine's Day to at least inject some kind of wonderment into it. Some kind of whimsy and fancifulness,
Yeah, it's probably too late for that. The kid is very into whimsy. It's amazing how a dark sensibility is genetic. So,
Right.
lots of werewolves, lots of monsters, he thinks mommy's a vampire sometimes. Which is, I can't say it's totally untrue. I don't think.
Well, I bet it helps when somebody's not ready to go to bed and you're like,
oh my God, yeah.
But no, go ahead. Go ahead. I was interrupting the darkness of your genes and chromosomes transferring down to this new generation of noir writer. I mean, who does the kid take after more, you or your husband?
Oh, he's like my clone. Which is, he's like a very
good, by the way,
high maintenance, neurotic kid in a good way, very good. He's smart. He's got other attributes. And every time he's especially annoying, my husband's like, he got his personality from you, which is true. He's kind of like my, he's got different coloring. So he's like my little, light-eyed blonde clone.
Wow.
But very into telling stories, very dark, interested in monsters and all that. And it's definitely interesting seeing how your genes end up spreading out.
Well, let me ask you this then. This is a good transition to monsters in a way. I was excited about you coming on the podcast because everybody I talked to about you, when I met you at one of the BoucherCons, even it was it was probably Minnesota, but definitely in New Orleans. But everybody says two things about you. You're one of the nicest people they've ever met, and you represent almost like the future of the genre, and nobody can really put their finger on that. It's easier, obviously the nice part. I guess, I don't know, because your kid could be right. You might have this other side, we aren't seeing right here. It's always the quiet ones, But you seem in these two books, which are the Kate Miles for the audience, the Kate Miles series, which is PI. You seem to synthesize all of the elements of our various subgenres that agents and publishers like to silo us in. You seem to synthesize that together, but you put a nice noir cap, a nice noir flavor on it. And I don't mean, just the setting and the mood and maybe the rough language, but, you have a protagonist that ain't especially likable sometimes, or, you have, situations of moral ambiguity. I mean, that real philosophical noir. And that's what really just kind of excited me about, having you on the show and just seeing, and it put together in my mind what these other people were saying. And when I mean other people, I'm talking about, the creme de la creme, of our little happy crew.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah, and even when I say that, I mean, I'm talking about the people who are pushing the envelope themselves. They are, so when you hear other people are pushing the envelope, say that you're pushing the envelope better, that must be really great for you. And I but here's the thing. I mean, is this something that you really kind of engineer into it? And this isn't one of these pantser versus outliner questions. I mean, do you really kind of make a conscious effort to engineer that kind of synthesis into it? Or does it just come naturally? Because you are a painter. So in a way, you kind of are a pantser in some way. I mean, so what's your process in creating these stories? I mean, creating her and creating the plots and the characters around her.
It's kind of a combination. I think, one thing when I talked to you before, you had mentioned wanting to talk about women in noir. So, and I was, I had kind of had that idea.
Oh no, we will.
But I think for women in noir, and I think probably also for writers of color, there's more of an obligation to show your work when you're creating a character, because you can't rely as much on the trope. If you're not writing, this really hard-boiled, 40-year-old divorced, police sergeant,
white guy,
white guy. You got to do something a little bit different. You're doing something different, and you have to show why this is noir. So I think you're almost forced to make somebody really multidimensional. And I think if you're writing a woman who has flaws, you have to justify them. So you can't just, like my character, Kate, she's not a perfect mother. She had an opioid addiction that after a car accident, lost custody of her kid. She's desperately working to get it back. If that's all you hear, a lot of readers are going to close the page, because we're obsessed with everybody being a good mother in our culture. Meanwhile, if she was a man, it would just be like, oh, okay, It's like one of my favorite examples is like Ted Lasso, which is very entertaining. But if you heard there was a show about like a woman who abandoned her kid and flew to the other side of the world to take a job that she was totally unqualified.
Yeah, it would be like, no.
You'd be like, great, how cute? No, I don't think so. So there's kind of this obligation where if you want to write a character who's very flawed and you don't fall into, kind of the archetype, you got to show your work. So you have to make somebody really multidimensional. And when I was kind of thinking about other women who write noir, and you have that. There's a lot of writers where you feel like the character is going to jump off the page. So I did put a lot of work into developing Kate. And I was also, when I was writing her, it was a part of it was COVID. I had changed jobs, and immediately after changing jobs, I ended up, at home like we all were. And there was just kind of this feeling of loss, and transition. And I wanted to have a character who had basically had everything that gave her a sense of identity suddenly get ripped away. And then she had to kind of build up from there. So, I'm attracted to people in real life who are multidimensional and have kind of gone through transitions. It's what interests me. It's who interests me. So, those kind of all came together for her. In terms of the genre, I kind of think about it in terms of what do I want to talk about? What am I thinking about? What ideas do I want to put in there? And how can I use the structure of a mystery novel as an excuse? So, with Burn This Night, I was thinking a lot about meth-induced mental illness, in part because I have someone in my life who basically destroyed their brain with meth. And I was a DA for a long time, and we'd see it in the courtroom every day. And there's this mental health epidemic that never gets talked about, in part because people don't care as much as they should, in part because fentanyl's more deadly, but it's there. But you can't write a whole book about, meth-induced insanity. Nobody's going to read that. But you can put it in as a thread into a mystery novel. And, the structure, it lets you it gives you, you have misdirection. People have backstories. It lets you, kind of take all these kind of disparate elements and weave them together. So I kind of rely on that a lot. And I guess, lastly, I have flaming ADHD. So, in some ways, I think as a writer, it's a disadvantage because, you need you need a flow. But I think in some ways it's an advantage because my brain naturally kind of ping pongs around. And I like complicated plots so that I don't get bored. If the more kind of standard, A, B, C, D plot from one perspective, I think that would be harder for me to write because I would suddenly kind of, ping pong around and start thinking about a different character. Okay. I don't know. That's
no. I mean, no. This is great stuff. We could stop here. No, just kidding. But you've hit on all cylinders. But let me come back though and challenge you with one thing. As a woman writing in this genre, there seems to be, and we talked about silos. Your books very prominently say a mystery. They don't say a thriller. Mm-hmm. They say a mystery. Do you think that there is a push, out there, maybe it's conscious, maybe, like I said, agents and publishers, they have their own world, to really kind of nudge women towards this thriller label, rather than mystery, because if they keep in the mystery lane, it's going to smack too much like a cozy. That word mystery might smack too much like a cozy for women. You see what I'm saying? I mean, do you think there's something there, because you basically are writing a mystery, but you've got it's noir and it's hard boiled. However, you just, again, and then again, I'm just putting it out here because it's a podcast and we have to talk about this. There seems to be, not an aversion, but a kind of a lane change where women, writers and audiences move away from that mystery label unless it's a cozy, and everybody who's writing a thriller. And then if it's a thriller, it's not about, a protagonist that you'd see in a noir hard-boiled. It's somebody who is a good mother, but has all these forces lined up against her, and there's twists and turns, and she's got to anticipate who her enemies are. But she is a good mother, and she is probably a good person, and she didn't have these difficulties. I mean, do you see where I'm coming from here? I mean, am I inventing a conspiracy theory like last night in the State of the Union where there wasn't any? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about it. I think that there are.
I told you I put you on the spot, right?
Yeah, you are. You're totally putting me on the spot. But I do think that there are certain types of thrillers that kind of that women get pushed towards, especially kind of the domestic side of things. Lots of her husband's acting funny. Is he a murderer? I don't know how much of that is kind of market related versus audience related. I think people have very different expectations of women writers versus male writers. Like
Right.
especially the really hard boiled stuff. You don't see as many women's names, and you don't hear as many women talked about, which doesn't mean that they're not writing it. But I would not be surprised if at a publishing level, if someone showed up with, a Jordan Harper style novel, and I'm not saying they're Jordan Harper because there's only one of him.
There is, yeah.
Yeah, but if a woman showed up with a Jordan Harper novel, I think it might be, where someone's losing an eye, or pretend I didn't say that. That might be a spoiler. But there's you got a torture scene here and this, and
Right.
it's very very gruesome. I think that would be a tough sell. I think that you're probably expected to pull back a little bit, and I think there's probably because of that there's probably more pressure to fit into a box. Whether it be the cozy box or whether it be the domestic suspense box, I think there's more pressure in the same way that for when you're building a character, you have to kind of justify it. I think the book has to kind of say, okay, well, marketing wise, this is what this is. It's a cozy, or it's something else, or it's a traditional mystery. Ideally there's a, librarian in a quaint English town who, finds a body in the rectory. But I definitely do think that maybe there's a little bit less flexibility in terms of what you're putting out into the world if it's kind of experimental and different.
Right. Because, again, it really, the hook I was looking at was, again, just the covers, and mystery. And,
Mm-hmm.
and there is a school of thought. And again, not me, I'm just trying to report out what's out there and discuss it, that might think, if it's a female author and it doesn't say thriller, and it's a female author and it says mystery, there are going to be certain people who are going to automatically assume, okay, maybe this is some kind of cozy if it says mystery.
Oh yeah, and
You
pieces of advice that I got was with finding a pen name, because I changed the spelling of my name slightly, was keep something androgynous, because a lot of men don't think that they would enjoy a female writer. Which I think that's becoming. I'd like to think that that's becoming less true, but I think that people expect something less dark for women. I'm always pleasantly surprised if I pick up a book by a woman author and it's like really dark and gruesome, and I shouldn't be, because there's no reason to think that it wouldn't be. But I think in your unconsciously, you're kind of trained to assume that women writers are going to be putting something out there that's a little bit more prettied up.
Well, let me switch gears then to the books specifically. I mean, you've got two characters, one in each, who, I mean, I'm not going to say they're MacGuffins. They're not, but they are vehicles in a way. One's Margot in the first one, the other's Abby in the second one, more or less. I mean, did you look at them as vehicles, or are they, to really move the story and really challenge the character, or are they real flesh and blood, visceral people in and of themselves? What were your thoughts going into that?
Oh yeah, I mean they're both the victims. They're both dead. But
Right.
you know,
Right.
I like to have flashbacks from the victim's perspective, because especially like I keep killing beautiful women and I need to stop. I'm mad at myself every time I just killed another beautiful woman, and I'm working on killing a fourth. So, we all have our bad habits, but
I hope there's nobody roaming around here from Beret who you had a beef with that is being continually killed.
no, I mean, I do. There are some people from my past who, like, they might make some appearances. I'm not going to say
Right.
I won't get in trouble. But I think especially given the history of the genre, I don't want to just have somebody where, like, okay, well, whatever, she's dead. She's just the stereotypical, lipstick body. But and I also want people to care that someone's dead. So it's like, okay, fine. I have a paragraph worth of background information and a body, and now, 200 pages about who killed her. Well, I want to kind of give her a voice. I want to make her unique. And I want people to care about why she's dead. And I think, but also for both of those characters, they served kind of a specific plot function. Like with Margot, I want to write about the art world, because I went to art school, I did painting, I worked in a gallery, and I guess on the one hand, it's a it's a nightmare of a world. And also, from a strategic standpoint, I wanted to put a book out there, and I'm a prosecutor who went to art school, so that I needed to be able to show why I'm connected to the book. So there's a lot of chapters from Margot's perspective. She's a psychopath, borderline, but there's a lot of her that's based on me, the way she thinks about art. She's got kind of a mean, salty sense of humor. So she was kind of there because it let me talk about the art world. And then
Right.
Abby is she's a former actress and she ends up going to changing her life, going to social work school, and she's trying to help her brother, who has this meth addiction, and it becomes more and more insane as the book goes on. And I wanted to bring in how families are affected by the meth crisis. So I had her perspective. I also had her sister a little bit, who takes a totally different approach to their brother when he kind of goes off the deep end, which is something that I would see all the time in court. You would see families torn apart where you have, one family member who says, I hate him, I'm done. Why are we dealing with this? And you have another family member who is, devoting all of their waking energy into trying to help someone. So, for her, it was, a way to both get people to care about the victim, and also a way to kind of talk about a different angle of this crisis.
Right. Well, look, does the story come to you first and then you want to fit these issues in, or do you think about these issues first, or does it all come together like in a big pot all at once? What are your thoughts on that?
Probably the issues, kind of the stuff I'm thinking about, and I try to throw it in together. Like with Burn This Night, I would help if I remember the title of my own book, right? I was like, what's that called? But with Burn This Night, I was thinking a lot about meth. I was thinking a lot about kind of DNA, and the solving cold case crimes. I was thinking a lot about kind of misconnections, I think, and people trying to connect and not being able to, because there's a lot of characters in the book who are decent human beings and just wired differently or have a different set of beliefs, and are just not able, especially within families, and are just not able to come together despite their best intentions. And I kind of had all these ideas in my head, and I really wanted to write a book that involved siblings, where one of them ended up going down this drug crisis. And then I kind of needed to build a plot around that. And I also had a place in mind for that book, because I had been staying in this beautiful mountain town while we were doing some work on our house. And it was just, I would walk around the town, and it was really just idyllic and pretty. And it felt like, but at the same time, it was a place with a really substantial fire risk. And that's something that we would live with in Southern California. There's this
right, yeah,
very, it sounds cynical if I say very noir, but very, very real and present juxtaposition of extreme beauty and charm, and the constant possibility that Mother Nature will go wrong and the whole place is going to burn down. And my town, I lived in Sierra Madre. It was very, very close to Altadena. We were evacuated for 6 weeks, and it was not the first time we evacuated either. So it was something that we lived with. And I wanted to bring that setting in, and just, that sense of, this is part of Southern California. Like you talk about LA Noir, it's not just, strung out wannabe actresses and, 2-bit con men and,
right,
ugly strip malls. Like there's
right.
other threads to Southern California that I kind of wanted to bring in.
Well, yeah, because I mean, the town in the second book was not, out in the middle of nowhere, nor was it a stop on a kind of the road book. We talk about Jordan Harper. It wasn't a stop on the road to doing something to get away from somebody or to get at somebody. It was right there near Los Angeles, really, right? I mean,
Okay.
So let me ask you this. Well, first of all, be careful, because you're up there in the Pacific Northwest, and my nephew keeps saying there's going to be a big tsunami there soon. He's into that kind of stuff. So watch it.
Or a volcano,
Or a volcano, yeah. Those two mountains up there are actually volcanoes. I didn't know that till I was like old, like I am. I thought they were just mountains, like Mount Rainier and Mount Hood, or volcanoes.
Yeah, I mean, given my luck, it's going to erupt tomorrow because but
Yeah, well, don't be on the beach.
yeah.
That'll be. But when you were a prosecutor, though, 'cause you talked about these issues, you talked about fleshing out these characters and these backstories, and getting to see that they were whole people. However, I mean, when you're in the DA's office. I mean, isn't the whole point to kind of, for lack of a better term, stifle your empathy? I mean, aren't you? Don't you have to become somewhat of a weapon? A weapon for righteousness or the law. But I mean, a weapon still. I mean, is that a thing, or I mean, or did it help you develop even more empathy and more ability to dig down deep because you had to have this kind of laser focus?
When I was at when a prosecutor's office is functioning correctly, I think it's the latter because there are certain crimes that are just horrific. I people love to say they don't believe in evil. I believe in evil for sure. Some people are evil, but a lot of people are not. A lot of people do bad things. A lot of people do stupid things. A lot of people do desperate things, and most crimes fall into that category. And when I was at the DA's office, what you would hear over and over and over again was do the right thing. It was a mantra. It was, I remember hearing before my interview with the DA at the time, Jackie Lacey, who I had tremendous respect for, that she cared, she had started a lot of, special courts for, people who had done, kind of lesser things and was very into, justice and proportionality as opposed to just bringing down the hammer. And especially, when you start out, you're doing a lot of lower level crimes and, you see desperate situations. You also see you see a lot of people who've done bad things and who are decent human beings. Like I remember having one case where, that it was a very low level misdemeanor type conduct not by the parents involved. So it was charged as I think a misdemeanor child abuse. And the dad, he had a very significant violent past. Got out of prison, he got somebody pregnant with twins, completely turned his life around, was raising those boys, doing everything he could, got a pardon. He was a very decent human being. And, despite having this past and, I remember we had a minor celebrity come in and talk to a group of defendants at one point, who, sort of implied that, when he was in prison, he may have been responsible for the death of a prison guard. Read whatever you want from that. But this is this person who is wealthy and has made it. And I'm not going to say anything else because I'm going to get myself in trouble. But
no, fine. That could be a lot of people out in LA.
Could be a lot of people, but was also donating all this time and giving back. Decades later. And obviously had these really good threads to who they were. So you start. I think when you're in a good office, you develop more empathy. When you talk to a lot of good policemen, and look, we all know that there's a spectrum, but they're definitely the ones who I think of who I have a lot of respect for. It's the same thing. You see people, and if you see people regularly who are talking about the worst thing that's ever happened to them, and I don't see how you can't not become more empathetic and put things into proportion more, I think, when you're in that kind of environment. And there are other prosecution offices, certainly one that I previously worked in where it's more of everybody's a hammer mentality, where it's, I think, to me, that's where things are not being done right because you're in the business of justice. You're not in the business of, trying to destroy people.
Well, did the experience help you? Let's just say, would your writing process and creating the plots, the characters, the backstories, would it have been easier had you been a defense attorney?
I think it would be different. I think that's a great background. I know. I mean, Wes Brown. I know you interviewed.
Yeah.
Great storyteller, former, I think, current defense attorney, I have no doubt that makes him a better writer. But I think it's probably kind of similar. It's a similar world. You get different perspectives. We talk to victims and witnesses. They talk to defendants. But it's the same thing. You get in the habit of seeing someone as a whole person, and also you're exposed to a lot more of kind of dark things that can happen to a person. You're not kind of stuck in this little box of everything is fine, and nobody does drugs, and nobody has one too many beers
Yeah.
in a car.
Yeah, to me it looks like, I know some people who were prosecutors with just federal and here state, if you want to call it, and defense attorneys. And the interesting thing, now, and of course, not all of them are authors. I mean, virtually, it's not just none. They might have something they're hiding on their computer at work, though, from their bosses. But for me, what I've seen is, I came up with this theory from talking to Wes, believe it or not, is that the ones who are defense attorneys, when they create these plots and these characters, there is usually a protagonist who is a criminal. Let's face it, is a criminal. But this person, it is a whole person, and there are reasons why they're doing this. And there's usually somebody else who is a worse criminal. Whereas the people who come from the prosecutorial, the state background, there's usually that one person, and they have a lot of dimensions to them that are really awful and are really good. And I call it the Godzilla and Monster Zero thing, because it seems like the defense attorneys, when they come up with a story, there's I'm talking about Godzilla now, and we're going to deep dive nerd shit right now. But Godzilla now, who's a monster, but he's our monster. I mean, he fucks up everything, but he does draw a line, Yeah. And then there's King Ghidorah, Monster Zero, who doesn't give a fuck and will just murder everybody. So you see what I'm saying? There seems to be there's a protagonist who is definitely a criminal, but there's always some worse bastard out there. Whereas the people who come from the more prosecutorial or corporate lawyer or whatever background of writing a story, it's usually somebody who has a lot of facets, but they don't have that. There isn't that point counterpoint going on, and I attribute that to them in practice, where they have dealt with people, they've represented people who, as you said, are basically good people that have been backed in a corner. Yeah. And are either lashing out or doing whatever they can to put food on the table. And yes, then there are other people who are out there who are truly evil. And go ahead.
I think they get really in tune to knowing the difference and knowing where people fall on the spectrum. And
right.
I think that's a huge advantage if you're writing noir. For me, there's a line, and if it's you see it a lot with TV shows where like Sons of Anarchy. It was very entertaining when it starts out. There was a point where everybody just got too evil, and I didn't care if they all died. It was like, okay, well, maybe if the rival game should just come in with machine guns and take them out because I'm done. And I think that probably a lot of readers have that. Like, well, you need that thread of redemption, and if you don't have it, you're just totally lost. And I suspect that if you're a defense attorney, you're working with people all day. You kind of know the difference, and you also know what good part of a person's character and story to push. Whether it's to a jury, whether it's to try to get lenient from the other side. So I think that's a huge advantage. And then I think we have a lot of that on our side too. We make our own decisions. It's like, when do you give someone a break? When is someone completely irredeemable? I did a lot of domestic violence cases where, honestly, there's not a lot of room for redemption in that.
No.
in that region. You see the difference between some of those cases and some case where someone got desperate and broke into a house because they got to feed their family. You can't be doing that, but it's not the same thing as someone who has been terrorizing this woman and basically turned her into a prisoner. So you start understanding a little bit of the difference. And I think, probably on our side, we understand a lot about investigation. We're not cops, but we know how to put a case together. We know what to look into. And on the defense side, there's a huge advantage to really getting the firsthand story of somebody who's made horrific choices and whose life is totally fallen apart. And when you're putting a book together, you rely on your advantages. You're saying, you might say, okay, well, I know a lot about this process, so I'm going to write about this. Or you might say, like, maybe on the defense side, you're thinking about a particular person or a particular, type of situation that your clients go through, and you want to write about that. So, definitely, I think I don't think any of us bring in specific cases. That's a big no-no. But in terms of like generalized experiences, you bring in, you write what you know.
Well, let me just ask you this then. And this is just going to be kind of a rolling kind of thing. And let's go to Kate then. Why didn't you make her a prosecutor? Or why didn't you make her a cop and turn it into a police procedural?
Oh, she started out as a male cop.
Oh yeah.
And then honestly, it was.
But why didn't you just turn it? Because you've got other writers who have whole. Look at Tracy Clark. With this character that runs right through, and it's all that police procedural juiciness. Mm-hmm. Why didn't you just leave it like that?
Well, I think in part when I started writing the series, it was just nobody was interested in police procedurals. There had been a lot of
fair enough. That's a good answer.
Horrific killings in the news.
Right.
Nobody wanted to read about good cops. It was not happening. And I think at the same time, I kind of got to a point where I knew both too much and too little. So I felt like to write a police procedural, like I talk to cops all the time. You read the police reports, I know the generals, but then I knew what I didn't know. And I think if I didn't come from a law enforcement background, I would just write it. It's a good story. Nobody really cares about the nuances of how to get a warrant. But right. If I was kind of too in the weeds and not in the weeds enough. So I wanted somebody who understood investigations, but also was not having to rely on the nitty gritty of like what exactly a crime scene should look like. So she was kind of 1 degree removed. And then I think also just I hadn't really thought about writing a prosecutor. I just finished a book and sent to my agent, which is focused on a prosecutor.
Okay.
So that was kind of a fun thing to do, but I'm not particularly interested in writing about myself. Like I'm more interested in other people and creating a character who's, gone through different challenges. So, I didn't really necessarily want to go the prosecution route at the time. Plus, I guess I didn't want to put myself in a situation where I was like talking smack about an office where like,
right. I was going to say,
maybe I was still there. Like I have a character who may or may not be based on a former coworker with, specific tattoo details. I wouldn't necessarily want to have that as a prosecutor.
Especially, in Southern California, excuse me, when there's so many high profile cases and, prosecutors there just dragged through the mud for being either incompetent or too hammer-like, one or the other, I totally understand that. Do you think that it would have been also limiting? Let's look at the lawyer thing. That's been done, obviously, so many times. But would it have to have turned into almost a kind of sexual thriller or something like that? Because people are bored by getting a warrant,
right.
Sitting down and drafting pleadings, from basically forms. Nobody cares about that. But if two prosecutors are working late and they have sex on the desk at night after work, that sells. You didn't really want to go near that, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think if you're going to write a book based on prosecutors, something has to go wrong, and they have to there has to be a reason that they're not doing things they should be doing, which is kind of the one I just finished, that's kind of the way I was going in. Because if everybody's doing things the way they're supposed to, like it's not, it should be routine. It should be boring. You shouldn't be,
Right.
running off to talk to a witness all alone at midnight with a handgun and, like, nah, it should be, very, very buttoned up. So if you're, I think there aren't that many books that focus on prosecutors, I think, for that reason. And if you have to kind of come up with the right plot to explain why this person is going kind of out of the norm. But you're right in that you can't just be a standard book of, and then I ran court and I did pleas in 20 cases and then it was lunchtime. That's not good fiction.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, and it would have to either take some political diversion, or the prosecutor would have to be, a serial killer, or doing meth in the office or something like that. Yeah, I mean, it would be that's a little, that's not to say that doesn't happen.
Oh no, that happens
in real life, but well, I know you've probably been asked this question before, but I just for tick off my list here. When you're painting, is it a different part of your brain than when you're writing? I look at it's a very trite and trope question, but I think people just seem to want to hear that. I mean, and I'm sure you're tired of answering it, but is there a difference? I mean,
I think it's very related. I think it changes how you approach things. I think I would say that writing is probably in some ways easier because I was never quite good enough at drawing to, take it beyond the kind of school level. And you don't have that hurdle with writing. So that's very freeing. But, you're thinking about, what is the most dynamic way to present something? And you're thinking about what is a dynamic idea that you want to present? And all of that is there. And I think editing for me is very similar to painting. It's like when you paint, you get the general thing on the canvas, and then you have to just keep refining it and keep going back until it looks right. And I think I'm a very obsessive editor, even though I never notice typos. It's terrible. You would think it was
that way too.
Based on my typo number, but in terms of like word choice, I mean, I am obsessive, and I think that probably comes from painting, of just trying to take something and refine it and make it as make sure that every corner of it is I hate the word impactful, and I almost said it. So, but as just it packs as much punch as possible.
Do you and this is a lot of left field question. I mean, do you impart that methodology to your kid in terms of what stuff he's doing? I mean, he's just a kid, and you don't want to unkid him. I mean, make him obsessive. I mean, but do you either consciously or unconsciously try to impart that approach that try to get the broad swaths down, but then just charge in later and really form it up, or do you just let her rip? I mean, what
oh god, no, it's triage. I got one's turning 5 tomorrow, the other one's 19 months, neither of them sleeps, both super high energy. I try to keep him alive and happy. That's right. That's pretty much my goal.
Right. Yeah, you're not going down. Yeah, you haven't gotten to those specifics quite.
No,
I don't have the luxury of those yet.
Make him eat fruit because it's really not socially acceptable to have scurvy at the age of 5.
Right.
That's about as detailed as I get.
Well, but one of them is old enough. I mean, to create, to draw, to write. I mean, do you think is important to kind of tell them at this stage, just get the basics down. You can always come back and really make it what you want, or just, is that too advanced? Do you think?
I haven't thought about it in those terms. I definitely encourage the storytelling. Is the big one for sure. He's got the verbal gene. I mean, he'll like at the 4th of July, he said the fireworks look like sea anemones. He just,
oh, wow. Okay.
Oh yeah. He's got all kinds of, he'll bust out kind of similes and metaphors, and I don't know where they come from. And, I remember when he was little, he said his friend when he got mad, burned with a fire that's hard to stamp out, which I'm pretty sure he got from his teacher, but I don't know. So there is a verbal.
He has a better vocabulary than most of the people about a mile from my office right here in DC.
Yeah, no, he's a little scary in that department, but that I try to encourage. Even though all our stories are going to be told by AI by the time he's an adult, but
right.
The storytelling, the imagination. I try to encourage that. We tell stories, we read lots of books, and we're currently working on the not lying, and stories are different from just pretending that you have a stomach ache all the time. But that's a work in process.
Yeah, that getting back to DC. I mean, I don't envy any parents of any young children having to deal with that, given what's going on among the adults in charge here, but that's another story. I don't have a political podcast. I should, but I would probably lose all my hair. But do you, where do you see yourself in terms of moving? Are you going to continue to challenge Kate, or are you going to move? You just delivered this manuscript.
Yeah.
Do you think you might try a cozy? I was at an event this summer with Laura Lippman, and she wrote one, and you'll try a domestic suspense thriller. I mean, hey,
yeah.
There might be some of those stories where you were working late at night, you heard some grunts and groans in the cubicle down the road there from your fellow prosecutors. I mean, what are your, where do you see yourself doing anything like that?
I'm not a cozy girl. Not throwing shade. Some of those books are fabulous.
Oh yeah.
I have a dark sensibility, and mostly I'm interested in human psychology. And I think that you need to put people in difficult situations to kind of see how they react and kind of learn about, what happens to a person if this is going on, and then you throw this in. So, I'm always going to have a pretty high level of mindfuckery, if that's
but that works.
Yeah. And so, the last one I turned in, it's a standalone. It's not Kate related. I'm working on, I'm working on like 3 different ones now that are all totally different. And right. I haven't for a 4th. So, I can't say that there isn't necessarily one world that I feel like I'm going to be devoted to. Like I have got 3 totally different worlds kind of going on right now. I'm just trying to figure out which one I want to finish. And I do want to sort of maintain that freedom, because I think I write better when I create a scenario where I go into it thinking, how the F am I going to pull this off? And I don't think my ADHD brain does well when something is kind of set up easy. Easy is the wrong word, but where it's just like, okay, well, this world exists and these are the characters, and now just put in a plot, I kind of shut down. So I think I'm probably going to be going off on a lot of tangents, because it's just kind of how I think and how I work.
I was asking because it was my last little missive about the cubicles down the way. I mean, if you were really thinking about mindfuckery, I mean, maybe domestic suspense as an experiment might be something, you would be good at. I mean, bringing the noir flavor to it, it certainly needs it. That would be interesting. I mean, I certainly, would go out and rush out and get that. You're dipping your toe in that more so than a cozy. I couldn't see you writing a cozy unless we totally changed the whole definition of that term.
You never know. I would love to try out some of my favorite books, though, that I think that I read are like, if you take just the whole suspense, the whole book is kind of based around just the dynamics between 2 or 3 characters, and how there's almost like oh God, what's that book called? Like, if I think about like Broiler is, I think, one of the, it's astonishing.
Right.
It really is, the book is based around the dynamic between these 4 characters and this like insane situation that's set up, which incidentally was like the first book I read to my baby, which is probably a little messed up given that.
It wasn't a Jordan Harper. novel
Oh God, I read
on
an
audio yet with the speaker on your stomach. That would have been
yeah.
great.
No, but I feel like for me, I do better when I have a lot of content, like a lot of content. Like I don't think I love books that kind of like zero in on that, but I think that I just function better with a lot of moving pieces. So maybe I'll try to domestic suspense. And I love that stuff. But I'm not sure if it's necessarily where I'm focusing now.
Well, let me we're heading almost to the end here, and I just wanted to ask, do you what do you think about, our community? I mean, I started off saying, the two things, that I really wanted to, I wanted to get you on the show was, first that, you represented the future and that subset of the future of women really writing noir and hard boiled. And the second was that you were just an absolutely great person. It seems surreal to me sometimes that there are so many absolutely great people.
There are. It's yeah.
And you and I coming from legal backgrounds, I mean, that's even more surreal, when you
No one's gonna say that about lawyers.
And most of us are actually fairly normal people.
Yeah.
I never understood, although the opposite was, I never understood why they had all that crap, before you took the bar exam where they had to examine whether you were a monster or not, because most people became monsters after they passed the bar, not before. I mean, what's the use of screening them out, earlier, but it is amazing to me, the camaraderie and the supportiveness of the community. Even though you do have little pods of people, that congregate on, and then there's cross pollinations here and there. But I mean, did you anticipate that, or did that take you by surprise, or did it just kind of grow on you?
Oh no, totally. So maybe by surprise. I don't have very high expectations for like human nature. Whether it just be maybe from my, my day job and from being a lawyer. But it's I did not expect at all. And I would say every time I hear, which is rare, an anecdote about a crime writer not being lovely, that's what takes me by surprise.
Yeah.
Because people are so welcoming and unpretentious. And it was interesting because the other day I was talking to like my kid's friend's dad. Was talking about the heavy metal community, which I don't know anything about. I'm more of a, country song singer girl. But he was saying that those guys, when you meet them, they are the nicest people on the planet, and it made me think, because they deal with really dark material, and we deal with really dark material.
Yeah.
And honestly, in the prosecution world, I mean, like we got some psychopaths, but for the most part, you deal with dark material, dark stuff, and and people tend to be really lovely. As far as lawyers go, but I don't know what it is. If it's that when people have kind of, maybe it's an outlet for, darker thoughts, or maybe if it's just you develop kind of a gallows humor and a different perspective when you're dealing with dark material a lot. But, it seems like that kind of just that camaraderie and niceness and down to earthness kind of maybe extends into other areas also that kind of deal with,
Do you think it's because a lot of us did something else before we did this, or we're still doing? We didn't decide, okay, I'm going to take all these English courses, be an English major, and get my MFA and write the great American novel. That we actually went out and into the world and let the world pound on us. And do you think that maybe kind of made us less, I wouldn't say less pretentious, because I'm a pretty pretentious person, but I mean more, just more receiving and giving of people. I mean, do you think that might be it, or that was my theory, at least?
I think that there's a certain amount of empathy that comes with what you're doing. I mean, you're sitting here trying to put yourself into another person's position, and you're trying to put yourself into another person's position while terrible things are happening to them, and thinking, and feeling for that person and presenting that person's story, and that if you're able to do that well, then you have a certain kind of mind that tends to, to go in empathetic directions. So I think that's part of it. And I think it's also, for a lot of us, it's like, suddenly it's like you're 35 or you're 50 and you just got invited to a birthday party for the first time. It's like, you like you said, you go out into the world, you get pounded on, you have all these other experiences. You probably always feel a little bit like an outsider for most of us.
Right.
A lot of us are a little bit neurotypical while also intelligent, which is really confusing bitch of a combo. And then all of a sudden you're in this room with people who think like you and have similar interests. And it's this kind of an unexpected treat where it makes you a little bit humble, and it maybe makes you a little bit, I guess, more generous just with your time and your energy than you might be in other sectors of your life.
Yeah, my moment was New Orleans when a certain Edgar winner brought his moonshine.
Oh my God. I know. I'm bummed I didn't get to try it. That I heard about that.
It was pineapple and lemon flavored.
and nobody went blind, so that's a plus.
Nobody, and here was, he was on my show, and I was sitting there going, my dumbass said, he must have brought it on the plane. I'm like, no, he didn't bring it on the airplane, unless they were using it to power the plane to get to New Orleans. But now Henry's great, but I mean, only at something like that would you see that. But Alex, I got to tell you, fellow Washingtonian, daughter of Swift Potomac, we are out of time here, but I am so happy, you were able to join us again. Alex Kenna, just the future of noir, pass the torch. And again, this is Chris Chambers Noir. We are here on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. You can see our bright smiling faces, and Incandescent Radio. I want to thank Alex Kenna for really making this a joyous hour, and I hope you guys take something away from this, because she's going to be the grande dame one day, and she'll tell her son, who's going to be he's going to be in his 50s. She goes, I talked to Chris Chambers on that old platform. I forgot what it is. Now you have images floating in the air and AI, but it was fun. So thank you guys, and have a great day.
Thank you all. Yes, Alex, that was awesome, scary, and fantastic. And as my kids are grown up now, so good luck, have fun. You never know who they're going to grow into be. So
yes, cool. that is true. My main goal is that he doesn't grow up to be an asshole. So
hey, that's exactly what I said about my kids. It's the goal. All right, you guys, thank you to all of our viewers, listeners, and readers. This is Chris Chambers Noir. And check him out. chrischambersnoir.com is his website. And check out Alex's books. They sound fascinating. This is Hope Katz-Gibbs, proud producer of the show on Incandescent Radio, Incandescent TV, and all those other cool places that Chris talked about. We will see you again next month. Have a great day.